Hello everyone and welcome to Unique. Today we are going to talk about logical fallacies, these errors in reasoning that undermine the logic of an argument. They occur when an argument is based on faulty reasoning, irrelevant informations, or misrepresented evidence, leading to conclusions that are invalid or unsound. Logical fallacies can be intentional, to persuade or deceive, or unintentional, arising from ignorance or cognitive biases. Scrolling through social media, we are bombarded with attention-grabbing headlines and persuasive arguments. We see political debates and speeches that scare us or make us angry. But how many of these arguments and debates are based on solid reasoning? And how many of these are trying to manipulate our thoughts through faulty logic? Recognizing logical fallacies is essential for critical thinking and effective argumentation. These errors in thinking can be deceptive, particularly when used in politics and media communication. Critical thinking is essential in the digital age, where we must question false or flawed claims. It helps us base our decisions on facts and evidence, not feelings or fallacious reasoning. We live in a post-truth era where emotions and personal beliefs often carry more weight than factual evidence, an era that demands strong logical reasoning skills to keep pace with our rapidly expanding knowledge. A critical thinker knows when to discard outdated theories and information and how to challenge misinformation that's based on emotions or faulty reasoning rather than facts. Recent studies highlight concerns about graduates' workplace readiness due to their limited critical thinking abilities. About 73% of American employers report challenges in finding recent college graduates with adequate critical thinking, communication, and listening skills. A 2021 AACU poll reveals that only 60% of companies believe college graduates have the necessary skills for entry-level positions. Given these challenges, educational institutions must prioritize clear logical thinking to combat the widespread problem of faulty reasoning and misinformation. Students need to develop the skills to evaluate the validity of arguments and assertions effectively. A logical fallacy is intentionally or unintentionally used to win a debate through the use of unfounded assertions, unsupported conclusions, or groundless arguments. Logical fallacies are less about the content of an argument and more about how that argument is presented and supported. Let's explore some of the most common logical fallacies. For each fallacy, I'll provide an example of a dialogue between person A and person B. The Strawman fallacy. It consists in deliberately misrepresenting and weakening someone's argument to make it easier to attack. For example, I think we should consider implementing a 4-day work week to improve work-life balance. So you are saying people should be lazy and that companies should go bankrupt by paying the same wages for less work? This example demonstrates how person B deliberately misrepresents and weakens person A's argument by creating an extreme distorted version that's easier to attack. False cause fallacy. Assuming that the correlation between two things implies that one must cause the other. For example, the day after a new traffic light has been installed, A local business reported lower sales. The business owner claims that the traffic light is destroying the local economy. This follows the same pattern of incorrectly assuming causation from correlation that we see in the definition. Ad hominem fallacy, originating from a Latin phrase meaning against the person, an ad hominem argument is a fallacy where the attack is against the person. This accomplishes two things. It distracts from the soundness and accuracy of the opponent's viewpoint and can also cause the person to feel attacked and therefore becoming defensive. In this case, A and B are discussing on climate change. I believe we need stricter environmental regulations to combat climate change. Why should we listen to you? You drive a SUV and took a vacation on a cruise ship last year. This example shows how person B attacks person A personal choices rather than addressing the actual argument about environmental regulation. Slippery slope fallacy, claiming that if we allow an event to happen, it will trigger an unstoppable chain of increasingly negative events. Therefore, the first event must be prevented and avoided. I think we should let our teenagers stay out until 10 p.m. on weekends. If we let them stay out until 10 p.m., soon they'll want to stay out until midnight. Then they'll start skipping school and their future will be completely ruined. This example shows how parent B creates an extreme chain of increasingly negative events from a simple initial proposal without any evidence that one event would lead to the others. Loaded question. Posing a question that includes a prejudicial or incriminating assumption, trapping the respondent regardless of how they answer. For example, the question, have you finally stopped cheating on your exams? This makes them look guilty whether they respond yes, admitting past cheating, or no, implying they are still cheating. These questions contains an unfair presumption that trap the respondents. The gambler fallacy, believing that past random events influence future independent outcomes, such as thinking previous roulette spins affected the next spin. For example, after flipping the coin and getting heads 5 times in a row, person A becomes convinced that tails must be due next, despite this being a completely random event, where each flip is independent. Wishful thinking. This logical fallacy or cognitive bias occurs when people believe things are true or false simply because they want it to be, rather than because of solid evidence. Here is an example of wishful thinking in crypto investing. I just put my life savings into this new cryptocurrency because it has to go up. The developers say it is revolutionary. Have you researched the technology and the team behind it? Well, I don't need to. I really think that this investment will work out. This illustrates wishful thinking because the investor bases his decision only on what he wants rather than on solid evidence. Bandwagon fallacy. The bandwagon fallacy occurs when someone claims an idea or belief must be true just because many people believe or follow it. This fallacy ignores the actual merits of an argument in favor of following popular opinion. Just because something is widely accepted doesn't make it correct or justified. I think we should buy the latest smartphone because everyone at school has one. If so many people have it, it must be the best choice. This example demonstrates how someone bases decisions purely on the popularity rather than evaluating the actual merits of a product. Black or white fallacy. Presenting a situation as having only two possible outcomes or choices when additional alternatives exist. Here is a clear example of the black or white fallacy in a political debate. We need to discuss reforms to our healthcare system. Either you support keeping our current healthcare system exactly as it is, or you want to completely destroy it and leave millions without care. Begging the question fallacy. Begging the question is a logical fallacy where an argument premises assume the truth or the conclusion rather than supporting. In other words, the argument uses a circular reasoning where the thing being proven is also used as the proof itself. For example, reading this book makes you smarter because it contains knowledge that increases intelligence. Or he is telling the truth because he never lies. In each case, the conclusion is essentially assumed in the premise, making the argument circular and logically invalid. Appeal to authority fallacy. Relying on authorities' opinion rather than providing actual evidence and logical reasoning to support an argument. For example, electric vehicles are bad for the environment. Why do you think that? My uncle is a mechanic and he says so it must be true. This example well illustrates how someone relies solely on an authority opinion without providing any actual evidence or logical reasoning to support the argument. Even though being a mechanic doesn't necessarily make someone expert on environmental impacts of different car types, their authority in one area is being incorrectly used to validate claims on another. Appeal to nature. Making the argument that if something is natural, it must be valid, good, or ideal. Here is an example on how a person might use the appeal to nature fallacy. Don't take those pharmaceutical medications. They are full of artificial chemicals. Instead, try my special crystal-infused water. Nature provides everything we need for healing, so anything that comes directly from the earth must be safer and more effective than lab-made medicines. This demonstrates the fallacy by claiming that something is automatically better simply because it's natural, while dismissing proven treatments just because they are artificial. Affirming the consequent. This is a logical error where someone incorrectly concludes that if a predictive outcome is true, then the initial condition must be also true. This is a logical error where someone incorrectly concludes that if a predictive outcome consequent is true, then the initial condition, the antecedent, must be true. The fallacy follows this structure. If P, then Q, Q is true, therefore P must be true. A very common example of this fallacy is if it's raining, then the streets are wet. The streets are wet, therefore it must be raining. This is a fallacy because while rain does cause wet streets, other things can make the streets wet, like street cleaning, for example. Just because the consequent, wet streets, is true, doesn't mean that the antecedent, the rain, must be true. Anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence is a form of informal evidence based on personal experiences, individual stories, or isolated examples. While such stories can be compelling and memorable, they are unreliable for making broad generalizations or establishing causal relationships because they may not be representative of the typical cases. In fact, they can be influenced by personal bias or selective memory, often ignores contradictive evidence, and cannot account for other variables or factors that might affect outcomes. For example, someone might argue, smoking isn't harmful because my grandfather smoked his whole life and he lived to be 90. This is a classic case of using anecdotal evidence instead of scientific data. Such personal stories are invalid evidence and often lead to incorrect decisions. Appeal to emotion. An appeal to emotion is a logical fallacy where someone tries to win an argument by triggering emotional responses instead of proving logical reasoning or evidence. Rather than addressing the merits of an argument, this fallacy attempts to persuade through feelings like fear, piety, or anger. This type of argument can be particularly problematic because it bypasses critical thinking and can lead people to make decisions based on emotional reactions rather than careful considerations of facts and evidence. Here is an example of appeal to emotion using fear. I think we should consider sending our child to public school. Are you crazy? Don't you watch the news? Public schools are full of bullies and dangerous people. Your child will be traumatized for life if you send them there. This is an appeal to emotion because it uses fear about safety and emotional trauma to argue against public schools rather than discussing actual evidence. It bypasses critical thinking by triggering emotional response instead of engaging with facts or evidence. Appeal to ignorance. Appeal to ignorance is a logical fallacy that occurs when someone claims something must be true or false simply because there is no evidence proving otherwise. A lack of evidence against something does not prove that it is true. Aliens must exist somewhere in the universe. What evidence do you have for that claim? Well, no one has proven that aliens don't exist, so they must exist. This demonstrates the fallacy because it relies on a lack of evidence against something as a proof of its existence. The appeal to tradition. The appeal to tradition fallacy occurs when someone argues that something is right, correct, or better simply because that's how it's always been done, or because it is a tradition. This fallacy assumes that older or traditional practices are automatically superior to new or different approaches. Let's take a couple, for example, that talks about wedding with the family. We'd like to have a small casual wedding at the beach. That's not right. You have to have a big formal church wedding with a white dress and all the traditional ceremonies. That's how weddings have always been done in our family, and that's how they should be done. This demonstrates the appeal to tradition fallacy because the family member insists on traditional practice simply because that's how it's always been done, without considering the couple's preferences or the merits of alternative approaches. Cherry picking. Cherry picking is a logical fallacy where someone selects only the data, evidence, or facts that supports the argument, ignoring contradictory evidence. It is a form of confirmation bias, and this can be done intentionally or unintentionally and can lead to false conclusions. Here is an example of cherry picking in a political context. My economic policies are working perfectly. During these 3 months, the unemployment decreased. What about the other 9 months of the year, where unemployment actually increased? I prefer to focus on our successes. Conspiracy theory. The conspiracy theory fallacy occurs in 2 parts. First, someone claims that a specific event or phenomenon is caused by a secret group of people. Second, when anyone challenges this claim, they are accused of either covering up the truth, being deceived by the conspirators, or being part of the conspiracy themselves. For example, the government is controlling the weather using secret satellites. That's not true. There is no scientific evidence for weather controlling technology. Of course, you say that you are brainwashed by them. This example demonstrates both aspects of the fallacy. First, making an unfounded claim about weather control, then rejecting counter-arguments by claiming the challenger is brainwashed. As we have seen in these examples, we encounter logical fallacies on a daily basis, everywhere, even in our own reasoning. As I've already said, understanding these common errors in reasoning can enhance our ability to analyze information and construct solid arguments. Recognizing fallacies in our own arguments helps us articulate our thoughts more clearly and logically, and it enables us to make more rational and well-informed decisions. When we can spot fallacies in others' arguments, we are better equipped to assess the validity of the information we encounter. This might also lead to more meaningful debates and conversations. But how can we use this knowledge? When we encounter logical fallacies in conversations, how should we respond? First of all participants in the debate should agree on its purpose. In my opinion, the least productive approach is entering a conversation with the sole aim of winning or persuading others. Instead, the most valuable objective is to seek truth together. With this mindset, when we notice logical fallacies in someone's argument, we can help restructure their points to remove these flaws and make the reasoning more constructive for the discussion. Logic should be taught in school from primary level till university. Throughout my own development, I've struggled with logical thinking, and even now, I cannot claim to have mastered it. Schools rarely emphasize teaching critical thinking and debate skills. We should be equipped with these fundamental tools that we can apply across all fields. Coming back to identifying logical fallacies in our own reasoning, it requires deliberate practice and self-awareness. Learning to recognize the most common fallacies, like those discussed today, is the first step. Once you understand them, you can practice spotting them in everyday conversations and media. And when developing your thoughts or responses, start questioning yourself. Am I basing this on evidence or emotion? Am I oversimplifying a complex issue or not? You can then verify whether you have evidence to support your claims or not. Remember, the goal isn't to win arguments, but to arrive at the truth through sound reasoning. By actively working to identify and eliminate logical fallacies in our own arguments, we not only strengthen our own critical thinking skills, but we also contribute to more productive and meaningful discussions. If you have any comment, leave it below. As always, I would like to discuss with you about today's topic.